So in today's web dev tip, we're just going to make a small change to the stats application. As you can see here, if you just go to /stats without a particular short URL ID, you just get a blank page essentially. So it might be a bit confusing if users land on this page and they're not really sure what they're supposed to be doing. So all we're going to do is just add in an input box and a button for the users to actually enter a short URL ID, and that will then just redirect them to the right URL to actually generate the stats. So we're just going to put this manually into our markup. So if we head on over to the code for the stats application, you can see here this strapline div is where all of the dynamic content gets inserted. So we'll just put something below there. We'll create another div. And all we really want in here is an input box. We'll specify its type text. And we'll give this an ID of short URL ID. And then above that we'll just put a label as well, and then just make sure that the for attribute matches the ID of the button. And inside there we'll just say enter a short URL ID. Probably won't mean much to anyone who's just randomly come into this page, but if you have generated a URL ID already, then you should know what that is. And then if we just after that put a button, and inside there we'll just say view stats, for example. Okay, so let's give this a class, because at the moment, if we look at it in the app, you'll see it's not going to look particularly nice. We want to center it in the same way that the header is, and also probably make it a bit bigger. Although if I zoom in, it should be reasonably in proportion at the moment, and also give it some coloring and some styling just so it can stand out a little bit and also affect layout. So we'll give the class the name of URL lookup, and then we can add that into our SCSS. So over here in the app, we've got our SCSS file, and here are some of the custom styles that we set up for the table in some of the previous tutorials. So this is only going to be affecting the stats app really, so we don't need to put it into the shared style sheet. We'll just put it into this style sheet to kind of only be used within the stats app. So the first thing I'll do is just set the display to be flex, and also the alignment of the items to be centered, so they all just like line up nicely. And we'll also set the text to be our white color, so that's for the label, and then specifically for the input, actually, and the button as well, we'll just give those a padding value here. So we'll say padding is 1 rem, for example. And I've done that thing again where I've used text as a property. That's not correct for the color. It should be color, obviously, to set the text color. So there you go. We can see that that's a bit bolder now, so we can kind of see what's going on. And I think what I might do as well is just put the label above the actual input box itself, because it looks a bit messy as it is there at the moment. So if we just put this in another div here and give this a class of URL lookup, and we'll use BEM. It's kind of another element in this section of elements, and I guess we could say this is called the input from the user maybe. So let's just give that a name there. So when we're inside of our SCSS here, we can then say if we've got that class, and input is the modifier that we've got there. We'll also set that display as flex, but this time we'll just set it as column. So we'll say flex direction is column. So hopefully that should now be putting it on top of each other. The only problem is the alignment's off because it's centering that there. So rather than having it at the center there, we'll just align the items to the end, and now that looks a little bit better. It's all lined up. Obviously you can play around with this to get the this layout that you desire, but let's just center this URL lookup div in the alignment with the header. So if we look in the original style sheet, the header had some padding here on the left and right for 8 rems. So let's use that again here just to make sure that it's lined up. So we'll say we don't need any on the top, actually let's put 4 rems on the top and bottom just to keep it the same. And there you go, you can see it's lined up with the header now, and when there is any other content above it, it'll just push it down so that it's not overlapping with that. Okay, so there's the markup and a small bit of styling for the button for entering a short URL ID. In the next tutorial, what we'll do is we'll just hook up an event listener for the View Stats button so that when a user clicks it, they're redirected to the relevant page in the Stats app. But that's it for this tutorial. Make sure you stay tuned for more web dev tips.